while since we've been able to get all 5 of us, but we got the work done that we needed to. I think the only thing we have left to do is to set the budget, approve the budget as it's presented to us, or make whatever variations we want. So we've had, I think, a pretty thorough discussion about all the budget items, and I think probably the only 2 things where we have a question are for the select board's budget and the school budget. And let's see, we do have the most recent, centered around the most recent copy of the warrant articles. And maybe we should just take those first. And I believe we are now in agreement with what's on the warrant articles after the list came out. So we could probably take a motion to say that we approve of the amounts in the warrant articles.
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All right. We have any issues to discuss about any of them? Or are we?
Just a question and procedure. We're only approving the ones that would require an expenditure of money. Is that correct?
Right. That's what our charge is. Just things that were required.
Okay, then I'll put together what the specific articles are afterwards.
Okay.
After the meeting, rather than going through it right now.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. All right, if there are no further discussions or questions, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Now to the budget itself. Does anybody have any questions on any of the budget items except for the select board and the school budget?
No, those are the only questions I had, John.
Yeah, so I would suggest, well, first of all, we do have the one budget item where Bob has to excuse himself, right?
Nope,
Not anymore?
not anymore.
Not anymore? Okay. Well, then, I would take a motion to approve as they are currently written, all of the budget items except for the select board and the school budget. Right? Does it sound okay?
Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
Just, again, on procedure, the
Yeah.
easiest way to vote it is to vote a total dollar amount. And that's not the way we're actually doing it here. In other words, there's not, we should tie our vote into some sort of money, to my way of thinking. And I don't think I really want to put 65 budget sheets as an attachment to the minutes from the meeting.
You never have in the past.
Well, no, because we've been doing it as a total dollar amount that we're approving. In other words, last year's vote was, we approved general government for whatever the total dollar amount was. And since we're breaking the selectmen's out of that total, I'd sort of rather like to do it by dealing with the selectmen's budget all by itself. And then come back with a total that's reflective of any change that the vote brings about.
Well, I thought all these years we actually approved the amount in each budget for a compensation amount and for an expenditure amount. And I think we have to do that, particularly when we've got all the independent. If we just put a dollar amount, then it doesn't Doesn't say who can and can't spend what money. I don't think we've ever just approved a lump
We
sum.
did last year. I've got the vote here. Look it up to see what we. What we did last year, our motion was was Article 32, which was the budget article. And with a budget of so much for general government, so much for schools, and so much for school transportation. And I would probably say this year, we probably ought to break the school out of that. We can break the selectmen's out, but yes, we're approving each individual budget, but you know, you're supposed to have the supporting detail, and I've been doing it by referencing everything.
I don't recall doing that before last year.
I didn't get out the prior years.
Hold on, let me see if I got it.
But you see, the thing is, do you want the minutes to reflect each item that's just going to go into Article 32? In other words, so much for salary, so much for expense.
I want them to reflect each budget that was submitted to us.
Okay, let me see here.
Because I think we have to because we at the town meeting, we will not vote on a lump sum budget. We vote on budgets by departments. They lump them together for the whatever the phrase is for the consent motion, but we vote on individual budgets. And we turn in to the town meeting for the annual town meeting booklet, we turn in individual budgets. Turn in a compensation amount and an expenditure amount for all the individual budgets.
Right.
Well, maybe we ought to amend the finance committee vote to increase our expenses so that we can, or wages, so we can pay the clerk of the.
Okay.
Suggesting he has to type up.
Okay,
0
I am
plus 0
pulling
is
up-
0, Bob.
I'm pulling up the annual town report from last year. Okay,
Yep.
at the meeting. And I do have still a copy of the consent agenda in terms of how we approve things. So this was the Finance Committee and Capital Improvement Committee reports and warrant articles. And Article 20, I believe, John, that's what you're talking about, to see if the town will vote to raise, appropriate, or transfer, and then it lists each item. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay. So then it lists each item: school department, transportation, moderator, selectmen, finance committee, et cetera,
right.
and salary, personal expenses, capital, and then a total.
Yeah.
And that is broken out in this document for each department all the way through health. So that was listed traditionally, but since I haven't reread the consent agenda, that did sort of modify how everything was presented because of COVID.
No, in past years, for quite a few past years, I mean, probably in the dozens, budget has been presented as one of us needs to approve budget items 2 through 5.
That's what I remember, doing a range of numbers.
Right, doing a range.
Right. Great.
Well,
But
no, I agree with that. So.
But it's
so in
clear from the
consent
way-
agenda,
But it's
they
clear,
start
wait a minute, Joe, wait a minute.
on 1A,
Joe,
1B.
hang on a minute, Joe, whoa. Before we start off, Lynn talks to the crowd. Moderator talks to the crowd and says the way we're going to do it is that we're going to approve these in a batch, but we're approving each individual item there. Just we're voting on them in a batch. And that if anybody has any questions or wants to break anything out individually to talk about it, they have the right to do so, and the town meeting will do that. But we're not voting on a lump sum for those 4 budget items, department budget items. We're voting on 4 different department budget items, and and the budget is presented as a compensation piece and a expenditure piece.
Right.
I can tell you, I have never listed each individual department's budget, because as a practical matter, there's going to be changes made along the way that we don't, in other words, we'll say the selectman's budget includes the accountant, or no. I'm trying to think of what they are, but there's some that are lumped together. And we don't have them that way. We have them as each individual portion. So where they take 3 areas and put them together, that's not the way we're looking at it. We're looking at them all individually. But I've never listed everybody.
No, I don't think we need to.
Okay.
But how,
Because I know we've approved all the individual budgets. We haven't voted on them one by one, but we've approved them as a one by one budgets. We've always done that.
yes, we have. But the question is whether or not our minutes properly reflect what we're doing.
The minutes only have to capture and reflect what you vote on. They don't have to show anything else but what you
Yes,
vote
they
on.
do. The state wants you to have any backup material that you're using as part of the minutes of the meeting.
Well, I know, but it's not mandatory.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I mean, that's what I was told. So when we do housing authority, we only have to capture what we actually vote on. We don't have to capture everything that we talk about.
No.
And
Absolutely. But if we're approving, I don't know,
Okay,
town clerk with a given salary, we should show salary, town clerk, X, wages X, expenses X. Or I've got to include a copy of all the budget sheets as part of the minutes of the meeting.
so what do you want us to do?
No, because we're not approving individual lines of compensation, and we're not approving individual lines of expenditures. The compensation is the total compensation, because that's the way it's voted. That is voted as total compensation for department and total expenditures for department. It's not voted as a line item budget.
I didn't mean it as a line item. I meant it as those particular 3 categories, or maybe a 4th one if there happen to be any capital outlay. I don't think I'm making what I'm trying to do clear, or trying to say rather. If we vote to approve all those budgets, somehow or other the minutes should reflect what those budgets are. Other than just the words, we approve those budgets, except for the ones we changed. It doesn't tell anybody what really occurred.
But we're publishing those numbers that you're asking for in our report. So wouldn't that be sufficient in the fact that we're publishing it to the town? We're just voting on it here. So yes, they want detail, but wouldn't the detail of publishing the report be sufficient to meet the state, you know,
I wouldn't
standards.
say I differ with you, but that's where I started from by having a total dollar amount voted, and that was, and then John said he didn't want it that way.
Yeah, because I don't believe I've ever voted on the total dollar amount.
He did last year.
That's what the minutes say.
Well, I can tell you, we didn't go through and say we approved each one individually. You see, the issue is if we just use the words, the budgets, if you don't have something backing up to show what they are, then you want to do it that way, then you should probably have to vote every single one. And that's obviously more than what we really want to do.
No, we use the consent method. We use the consent method like they do at the town meetings. Well, listen, just attach the pages from the annual town meeting booklet after it's published. Just wait until after the town meeting before you publish the minutes and just include that summary is all right there. I mean, you know, I just don't recall, and I actually don't recall what the specific motions were last year during the first of the pandemic years. But in all the years I've been on the finance committee, I don't recall us doing anything except approving. The intention of the vote that we took was to approve all the individual budgets for the compensation amounts and the expenditure amounts. So I think we ought to keep to that, because if we get asked a question about a specific budget, we can't say, well, we didn't talk about specific budget. We only voted on the lump sum for the whole group. And that's not correct. We voted on individual budgets. We voted on as a consent motion, but we voted on the individual budgets. We voted on the expenditure amounts and the compensation amounts. And if we have to speak at town meeting about a particular budget, what we know about a particular budget, we would be able to do that. And we'd be able to say we in fact voted this as a budget.
I don't know. I'm arguing with you, but I'm not arguing with you. Yes, we do approve each individual budget. We've looked at them. There's no question about what we've done. But my thought is, can somebody who wasn't a party to our discussions know that what is showing for the town clerk is what we approve? Because we do not reference any budget sheet. If our vote is just, we approve the budgets the way they were submitted, that's not much detail.
Yeah, but what we publish is enough detail.
But we're publishing it after we're taking the vote now, Joe.
I get that, but the state only, from a minutes reporting standpoint, only requires that you talk about what you voted or how you voted to approve, okay? Any other discussion does not have to be captured in writing. But since the state wants that, I don't think there's a problem. I mean, I don't know, you're saying maybe there is, but I don't think there's a problem that the detail that is necessary comes out after the fact. Otherwise, I mean, if you want to publish it, then let's just attach to this the FY22 notes. You know, if that's how you want to do it, I mean, take the FY22 2022 notes if you feel that strongly about it. But anyway, I scanned and emailed everybody the consent agenda from last year, the 4-page thing, in case you wanted to look at that. So.
Bob, on this sheet that we get from Chris, isn't everything included there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it would be.
Then you can use that as the backup. And this is a summary of what's on all the pages.
Okay,
I think that might do it. I think this is everything. And then you can note where we've made a modification to any one of the particular items. So you get that, and then you've got the schools and the transportation.
Yep.
okay, I will do it as I will somehow or other get a copy of that or make a copy of that section, digitize it.
Well, we now have that in digital form.
Yeah, but it's not, it isn't going to be in my Word document. In other words, the minutes are going to be a Word document. Yes, we do have a copy, but we've got to,
Yeah, just say see attachment
yeah, that's what I'm
Attached
talking
on the-
about.
with whatever the name of the document is. See
Now, see
attachment.
if I can nice and easily attach whatever that page or page and a half is out of the spreadsheet.
Yeah, there might be, I'm not that familiar with Word anymore. There might be a way.
So
in
you can
fact,
copy and paste an Excel document into a Word document, but when you paste it in, you paste it as a photo, not as a cell sheet, and it'll paste right into the Word document.
all right.
Right, but then
You
you
need
might
help,
have to
Bob, I
crop
can do
it. Yeah. Okay.
And with the electronic versions that we got, you should be able to separate out just that. Matter of fact, not just the page has got more on it than what we need there, but just
Yeah, I only need the first couple of columns.
yeah, create a page with that, and or else sum all the expenditure items together as another column, and then before you ever cut and paste it, you can put it in the form that you need with that.
Okay.
All right. With
Does that work for you, Bob?
What?
Look,
Does that work for you?
After I work for it,
we can't.
I still don't see why it can't be referred to, in the addendum for more details, see addendum, ... I don't even think you have to import it personally, but if you feel that strongly about it, yeah.
I always wondered why you can't say, gee, the meeting was recorded and it's on tape, and use that as the minutes.
Yeah.
But apparently you're not really supposed to do that either. You can't get a more complete set of minutes than by saying, okay, go watch this videotape.
my guess is there probably has to be,
4 hours later, you got the minutes.
probably online or digital records of the minutes are not enough. You probably still have to maintain written records.
Could be.
Okay. Anyway. Okay, so we're gonna vote?
Well, then, so are we okay with setting the first motion as being all the budgets that we received, except for, actually, let's talk about the select board budget, and then we can lump everything in the government together after we come to what we're going to do in select board budget.
Okay.
The issue on the select board budget is that the guidelines this year were for a 2% increase in salaries. Every year, there's been a guideline for elected officials for their salary increases. And it's last few years, it's been in the 2%, 1%, some years in past 3%, pretty much in line with pretty much in line, but not necessarily in agreement with something approximating the CPI. Although, as I said, it's not set up that way as the guideline. So this year, almost all the elected officials turned in a 2% increase in their salary item, personal salary item in budgets, except for the select board, which have a 50% increase. I don't see that makes any sense. The select board are supposed to be sort of our model politicians, and I can't see anybody thinking that we should be offering a 50% increase to all our elected officials. We're a small town. The select board is not a professional group. They are there to do their part for the town. There's sort of been this tradition that they've always.
How much is it per person?
It's in this year it was 9903, so 3301 per person, $3,300 per person, and would go up by 2% on that.
And they have to meet how many times? Once a
Well, twice a month they have scheduled meetings, but that has nothing to do with it. You know,
But we're talking $66, right? We're talking $66 per person, right? Times 3, so we're talking about $198.
The increase, the increase would be to $10,194 with a 2% increase. Is that what you mean for the
33? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, 3301 times 3 is your 9903, right? And
right?
So if you're talking 2% on $3,300, you're talking about $66 per person. So it's not like we're talking about a lot of money.
No, not the 2%. But the whole point is that the select board salary has never been a lot of money, and it's never been about money until apparently this year.
Because what is the total dollar increase per select board member in terms of what they budgeted? 1,700 per person?
Round numbers, yeah.
3331. It's about $67 a person. In a 2% increase.
No, I'm talking about what they're asking, because that's our debate.
Is just a second. $1,669.
Right. So they want a 50% increase. We've always done a 2% increase. So the real issue that we have to debate is, are they still model politicians if they make $5,000 a year versus $3,400 a year or whatever? So,
but you set a bad precedent, Joe. And I know it's not a lot of money, but to say any elected official we're going to give a 50% increase, I mean that's like front page stuff, right?
Yeah. I don't disagree that as a percentage that's an issue. I still always look at the absolute amount. So.
Oh, I do too. I agree it's not a lot of money.
Compromise amount. I mean, or should we just stick to 2%? Because as John says, being a select board member has never been about money historically.
No, and I agree completely with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
I worry about the optics of for the uninformed who choose to remain uninformed, and all they hear is 50%, and it's headlines and it's Facebook posts and it's all that crap that just creates noise. So I think you just say no, it's 2%, and that's what it is.
I find it ironic that they're looking for 50% increase at the same time that they're presenting to the town, or their committee is presenting to the town, a set of revised bylaws which strengthens the duties and responsibilities of the town administrator, which in effect reduces the requirements on the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
I couldn't sign up for a 50% increase. It's not because of anything other than the optics of a number like that. I mean, even in, the private sector, 2% increases are pretty much the standard, 2.5. Even with promotions to new jobs, new positions, they cap the scale change is usually at 20% at most. So, I just don't see how we in good faith could vote for, I know it's, it's a percentage, and I know percentage of the whole is small, but the optics are horrible.
I don't disagree. They just view themselves as CEOs, Rich. CEOs don't get 2.5%.
Could
No, I
they
know,
still get,
but select board members don't get 50. So,
And I agree.
could they get,
But-
could they
but
get
how
health
can
insurance?
Can I just finish one thing? So my question to everybody is, so how do we stay at the 2%? We can recommend that, but isn't that decision already now that of the town administrator sort of?
No, no.
Because we haven't changed the bylaws yet? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay, but next year, if the town administrator said, hey, it's gonna go to 5,000 per person for the year, whatever that increase is, although we can write negatively about it,
We can do
that
more
would
than,
be submitted in the budget, right?
we can do more than write negatively about it. In the
Okay.
budget, we will make our recommendation.
Okay,
And that's a written recommendation in the budget that's presented to town. And the select board will have their right. So on any one of the budget items that go to town meeting, there are potentially 3 different written recommendations
starting next year.
starting next year.
Okay,
And if we felt strongly about it, we'd stand up and amend the motion.
If it passes.
Yeah, if it passes. Another thing here is that I asked whether any kind of research was done to justify this. And I was told none that anybody knew of. So, I mean, it's going to be easy enough for us before the meeting to go and check what the small towns do. I can't believe small towns are giving $5,000 to their basically volunteer board of selectmen. So we'll have to see, but I don't think it's, I find it hard to believe it'd be justified. If we're the only ones who are going to do anything that even looks like a survey, and we find something entirely different, I have no problem at all of saying that we did a survey and or come to a different conclusion than the one that's in the budget. But as of right now, I just can't believe that.
but if we do a survey, I don't want to pay somebody $2,500.
No, it's not that kind of survey. We're going to check on, for example, in our annual report, not the town meeting booklet, but the annual report, they list everybody that's paid and how much they're paid. So select board members are in there. You can find out how much they've been paid. And I suspect that other towns do that too. So we're not Long Meadow, although our tax rate is approaching their tax rate. We're not South Hadley. We're not Chicopee. Chicopee's what, 50 some odd thousand people. We're 6. South Hadley's 15, 18,000. We're 6. So if you're going to try to compare compensation amounts for the equivalent of select board members in towns that have completely different structure and completely different tax base and a completely different size, well, then sure, let's start comparing little towns and big towns in California, see what they get paid there. That's just not the way it's done. We could take a look at other small towns in Western Massachusetts and see what the going rate is. And if we're out of whack, I think we should say it at the town meeting that we're out of whack. And if we're not out of whack, we'll tell them what we found.
Okay.
I mean, this is, I don't like to be arbitrary either way. And we don't have to be, but this has come up at the last minute. It's sort of one of the problems with putting the bylaws on this annual town meeting instead of having a separate meeting for it. I think the expectation is that we'll zip right through the bylaws. Well, the bylaws contain some fundamental differences in the way the town is operated. And I myself prefer that these things be examined openly in something other than just the information meetings. There were a lot of information meetings, I agree, on the bylaws, but there were not a lot of people that showed up. And this is going to be the first time that a lot of people hear about it. And should people have spent more time thinking about it and looking at all the documents? Well, theoretically, yes, citizens should have, but they don't. That doesn't mean that it's appropriate to use this kind of budget meeting to make a major change that isn't really been a chance to be discussed by by virtually anybody. So anyway.
So what are we,
Change the salary amount to $10,194.
okay. So is this a motion that we need to vote on, John?
Well, I think if we vote on this as a separate motion, and then we can just lump all the governmental budgets together and vote on them as one budget, I would think.
Okay.
Bob, what you think about?
Yeah, if we vote to amend this one,
Yeah,
and then then our next vote would be to approve all the original ones plus the one we changed.
okay.
And
Okay.
as per the list, and I can modify the list to show $190 rather than 5,000. That's so that
Okay.
the list will be accurate with what we submit.
Yeah, okay. Then they all take a motion to change the salary item on the Board of Selectmen budget to change it to $10,194.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, then all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you. All right, so then I think based on our past discussions, we've been comfortable with all of the government budgets. And so take a motion to approve the compensation and expenditure amounts of each and every one of the government budgets that we've looked at, that were submitted to us by the town administrator, and with as amended by us. We have a motion to that?
I guess
So
I'll
moved.
still move it because I don't know how to reword it.
Bob will tell us what we said.
I'll
Okay,
probably end up rewording it a little bit.
okay.
Or choosing the words. out of the
As
whole-
reworded, and I'll add as reworded by Bob. Okay.
Do I have a second? Is
I'll second.
there any further discussion on any of the budgets?
No.
If not, then all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, now, the school budget that is the school budget that we're looking at is, let's see, the following.
You know, as we begin the conversation on the school budget,
Yeah.
I would like to. I did spend some time. Bob had done some work regarding historic spend. Bob, you know the spreadsheet you built out?
Yep.
Which I found very interesting in spending some time with it. And yeah, I want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly when I look at it. And I know there's a disparity between enrollment, you know, between 2012 and, you know, your estimated 2022. But when I look at that, I say, wow, we've only grown the school budget over the past 10 years, 7.2%. I know that needs to be adjusted for enrollment. Where, you know, police, fire, and a lot of very important things have grown, you know, 62%, 200%, 99%, 300%, you know, respectively. And so when I think about that, could you elaborate a little bit more on that spreadsheet, Bob, and, you know, how you got there and, you know, what your thoughts are?
I hope I did it without bias, but I think I do have some bias in there. I think what was getting to me is that I see we've taken a public buildings budget and made a big item out of it when it used to be a little rinky-dink thing. The police has gone up, and it's surprising that it's gone up that much. The fire is costing us a lot of money, and the highway department, it seems to have unending need for money. And we've been running our finances in a way where we've been leaning on the schools, and these other departments are taking all the money. And I get to a thing, I'm not sure that it's equitable. So I tried to put down, obviously, the department spending, but also some other indicators in there of what's happened to our revenue. If you get into the per pupil cost, which adjusts out for the number of kids, the growth is still small. So I don't know. Does that explain it?
Yeah, I just found it really just, you know, when I looked at it, and really it's a great comparative. And, you know, I'm an analytics guy, so in not having access or know where to get access to, you know, the information that you put together, I found it fascinating. You know, when I look at, you know, a highway department in 2012 that cost us $440,000 now costs us, you know, $876,000 in terms of, you know, budget for estimated 2022. You know, a fire department, you know, that's gone up, you know, 226%. And I know there's different needs and so on. I mean, the reasonable growth of ambulance, I can look at and say, you know, that's reasonable, 11% over 10 years. That's very reasonable. But when I look at, you know, and we sit there, you know, often, and, you know, we can be pretty hard sometimes on the schools, and whether it's because of, you know, just, you know, transparency or clarity on some things. I look at, you know, a 7.2% growth between 2012 and 2022, and I ask myself the question, you know, where are we spending our money? right? And I just thought it was fascinating what you put together, Bob.
The school enrollment at one time was in the 1,100 to 1,200 pupil range. And it's now in the 700 pupil range. 7 to 8.
So
So
it's 860 something, John, from our meeting with the school committee.
that includes all the school choice students.
Right, including the school choice students, which we've certainly discussed ad nauseum. But when I look at, I mean, to the point of Bob, the per pupil cost hasn't risen either that much. So I don't know. I'm struggling with that one as we begin to talk about the school budgets.
Rich, let me find a document we put together for the town meeting booklet a few years ago. In it, we took a period of about 10 years and showed what the growth of, and it was really, I think, a per pupil expenditure kind of thing, what the growth was in the budget on a per pupil basis. And we compared that to two things. We compared it to what the state had mandated as growth through the net school spending amount. And we compared it to what we actually spent. And it was surprising that our growth was much more than even what was demanded by the state through the net school spending amount. But let me find that, and I'll email you a copy of it. I think it may have a little more of the kind
Yeah, I'd
of,
appreciate that, John.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying that as a committee here, we've not, at least kept up with or exceeded what the requirements are. I guess my question may be even on, a bigger, broader one that's not for us to think about is, are the requirements enough? I mean, when we look at, to Bob's point, a public buildings department, that's now costing us $400,000 a year. A highway department that's $875,000 a year. And I no disrespect, they do wonderful work, but certainly the wages haven't increased, that amount there. So we must be spending a lot of money on a lot of stuff inside of there. And so I look at it, and this spreadsheet, I know needs, probably more examination and discussion, but it certainly was eye-opening, Bob.
well, the other thing I've noticed,
You mentioned the state requirements. The state has pushed up our net school spending by 10% over that period of time. And I think when I sent the sheet out, I think I put into the email that when you adjust the school budget for the number of pupils, there's been about a 28% increase over the course of the 10 years. Dividing out the 10-year ago figure by the number of kids then, and the 20 budget by the number of kids at that point in time. So
No, it's in your email. Yep, I agree.
yeah, at 28%, that's still pretty much way below some of these other departments. The other departments, by the way, this does not include any capital. And just as an example, our capital costs are now running us over a 5-year average, are running at $600,000 a year. And we'll say this year, 50,000 went to the school. The balance ends up going to the highway and the other departments.
Well, I mean, your 28%, Bob, over a 10-year period is 2.8%.
Yeah.
So it's 2%, 2.8%, annually, and that's not compounding, right? So it's actually less than that. So when you think about it, it's just a stark spreadsheet that you put together in terms of where we're spending our money.
we've noted for quite a few years that the school expenditures always really have to be adjusted by the pupil count, the Granby pupil count. But on the town side, we've had quite a few years of between 6 and 8% growth in expenditures for general government. And, we haven't really commented too much on it because the budget has always been all tight in years, has always been able to been supported by the income, but it's never really been questioned. And it's a hard thing for us to question it just at budget time because it's an issue which goes beyond budget. It goes to the structural realities of the way the town government is run and what we should be doing in terms of the goods and services that are produced for the town. The police and the fire and the highway department are the 3 big budgets in town, and they have been increasing by quite a bit. And we've seen, for example, what can happen with us not having joined the consortium for dispatch. We get some costs that seem like they can't be right, but they are. And it's one of those things which I think ought to be looked at. And what I was thinking is that perhaps when we take a look, if we actually get into the project of constructing a financial plan for the town, that's one of the times, because it's done over the course of about a year, it's one of the times when those things can be brought up as issues which require some consideration and thought outside of just the budget season. A lot of things are noted during budget season. A lot of changes are trying to be made for good or bad through the budget, and that's not really the best way to go about running a town.
Let me tell you where I sort of come out. Will get us onto a little bit different subject. I believe that the schools should have the override money as part of their operating budget. It should go to them every year. You know, I'm thinking at the time, you know, it's a long time ago. No, I can't really remember what was said, but I would sort of tend to think that at a given point in time when the net school spending requirement was such that the schools couldn't operate and they got an override passed, the people said they wanted to spend that money over and above. And I know the law says that it doesn't have to be that way, but it doesn't mean it isn't right to be that way. You know, can you imagine what would happen if the Board of Selectmen said next year we're instituting a trash collection fee because we're going to let the money that was the override for trash go to the fire department because they need it? You know, you pass a budget one year and the schools get it, and then it goes to another department and they have to come back for an override the following year. It doesn't make any sense. So I think that it ought to stay with them. On contrary to a little bit to that, I am absolutely bug-ass on the fact that the schools have not responded to any of the financial information that we asked them for. They gave us some pablum on yes and no questions or procedural questions, but when it came time to try to prove their case, they've done nothing. It's almost like they're stonewalling it. This occurred to some extent last year too, but everything, because of the COVID stuff, it all sort of worked out. You know, I put down the numbers of what they've had a long-term problem. This problem is no different than what it was 5 years ago. If you can remember, we had joint meetings, and at one point the selectmen told Chris to give them some extra money. Then they came back and amended an article at town meeting, got it approved, had another amendment that was approved. So they've been operating not with 305,000, but with, that was some of the years, and there's about $600,000 years in there.
But it's more than that. This year, for example, there's over $500,000 in retired teachers' health insurance. And the school has very consistently refused to recognize that amount of money over the, every other city and town practically in the Commonwealth includes retired teachers' health insurance as the in-kind expenditures by the town. We all know that the mistake that was made by the accountant years and years ago, that Granby was not allowed to include that. But nobody has ever said Granby is in fact not spending that money and not spending that on schools. So any comparisons from figures that you get just by looking at state records as to what has been spent, that does not add the $500,000 a year that we've been spending on retired teachers' health care, or dug into the figures and subtracted it out from other towns, has no right to claim that they've made a comparison between what Granby is spending on education and what other towns are spending on education. Net school spending is a figure. It's a figure which is dictated by the state. It does not tell you what you're spending on schools, but also what is tried to be reported by the school system here is also not what we're spending on schools. It's off by $500,000, right off the go.
But the per pupil expenditure sheet that I sent you out with 5 or 6 years in it, that does take that into account. The
Yeah, but-
calculations that are in there, I reduced everybody else's expenditures by the amount of the insurance rather than increasing ours. So from a comparative point of view, those do reflect the retired teachers' health insurance. But I'm not sure that, while I agree that we spend more over and above net school spending than the amount that shows on our sheet, I think that sort of still begs a question as to whether or not they should receive all the override money.
No, because I disagree with that. And again, we don't have a complete set of figures to look at. When you're looking at a school, any school system, you have to ask yourself realistically, are they financially managing appropriately? And to do that, looking at a per pupil expenditure is a much better way than looking at gross amounts, because it gives you the real cost of educating students in town versus educating them someplace else. And it's hard to get that. It's hard to get that. Particularly now, even as the whole discussion on choice in students. The argument has always been that choice in students don't cost us anything, that it's just gravy for the income coming in. On the other hand, now, Adam said that the net school spending account, net school spending figure given us by the state accounts for all of Granby's students, including the school choice out, but does not count any school choice in students. So it's supposed to tell us also then, here's what it should be costing you to educate Granby students. If we can get a figure that is what we've been spending on just Granby students, let's say divide the total figures by just Granby students, then theoretically, we have the cost of educating a Granby student, because the argument for the schools is that it doesn't cost us anything to educate school choice in students. But it's hard to get those figures. It's hard to get those figures.
Well, I mean, the teacher retirement piece would be really the wild card in there. I mean, because wouldn't you just be saying my population of Granby students is this, and this is what I spend, and based on my classroom size requirements, if I didn't have these other students, I would have X number of less teachers, and this is what I actually would have for a cost.
Well, one of the questions is this, if you're taking a look at it, I've been thinking about some of this, is that we know how many, like say, homeroom classrooms there are. You can get that figure, how many homeroom classrooms there are. What is harder to get, and what we asked for but was not given to us, was what are the class sizes of all the classes that are taught? Are there basically one-on-one classes? And we've heard rumors of some courses being offered one student. Are there classes with 2 or 3 students in? Are all the classes at full-size classes? That's hard to believe. Are they all 2 and 3? Of course not. But to try to get a handle on exactly what that is and figure out what that's happening, it's very difficult to make a judgment. And the school likes it that way, apparently. They don't want you to know.
So, John, last time I knew, they were upside down by $800,000.
Well, there's another thing which came out at the school meeting last night, a couple nights ago. They have been given, and I don't know what form this comes in, money, COVID money for the schools. It's not been made available. It's not been just given to the town though, or not just given to the school systems and put in the bank account. Apparently, though, I'm not positive about this. This is one of these things that as you spend money, you can submit bills to them and they'll reimburse you or pay for it. I don't even know if it's a reimbursement or whether they'll pay for items that you pay. So that is an unknown figure right now that they've got sitting there. It was further said, my understanding is that school meeting that the state is recommending that you not spend it on regular educational issues, but try to spend it on what, capital items or maintenance items. And
I think the comment was, don't spend it on operating costs.
don't spend it on operating costs. But it's been clear, I think, that every time something other than operating costs comes up out of the ordinary, school committee comes to town and asks town to spend it. And here we are at a time when money is tight, unemployment's still high, we have high tax rates, and they want to say, well, let's take what the state has as a recommendation as a dictum, and let us not spend any of that money on operating expenses. To me, from a financial point of view, I find it absurd, just absolutely financially absurd from a management point of view. So since we don't know what the amount of money is and it's not in anybody's books right now, we can only assume what we want to assume until somebody tells us differently. And that is, they've got a bunch of money sitting there, which they're not telling anybody about, which they're going to get to spend on whatever they want.
So do you think they're gonna come, do you think they're gonna ask for money at town meeting?
Excuse me?
Do you think the school is gonna ask for more money at town meeting?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Are
They
they-
claim $785,000 short or something like that.
Wasn't there some big capital expense that they were talking about? Some boiler or something?
No, they're
Yeah,
gone.
That's
I'm
all
sorry?
done. That's all done.
All done,
That's-
meaning,
The selectmen didn't put it on the warrant.
oh, okay.
They had
So
two.
what is the number the budget should be then? Given all these other things that are going on, and yes, I guess this COVID money is coming as a result of the CARES Act or whatever act was passed by the federal government. But I'm beginning to think that I would think that non-operating would mean we don't want you to spend this money on hiring more teachers. I can't imagine that we wouldn't be spending this money on better securing the school so that everybody stays healthy or whatever else is going on. So there must be some parameters there, that comes out of the act.
Yeah, but trying to figure it out is impossible. In other words, I looked up what some of the rules were for these grants
Mm-hmm.
to sort of, I think, try to figure out, is it a sure thing or not a sure thing? And all I got was a bunch of bureaucratic BS in the regulations, see here, see there, move over here. Give us a call, just talk to your liaison.
So they don't really know, Bob. They
Pardon?
just, no, they're not sure. They don't know.
I'm not sure of that.
Well, I don't know. This is like another law that you get passed, but then there's gray areas. So everybody's trying to negotiate the true stipulations of what we can really do and not do. So I don't know.
Yeah,
So
but
we have no visibility then to how much money it is, right?
No, and Chris, by the way, said that he thinks the grants, well, there's amounts attached to them. That's the maximum that you can get. You're gonna have to justify it. So,
But we certainly will know a year from now, after their spend versus budget, how much of that there was, right?
not necessarily, only if they spend it.
Well, that's
no,
what
they
I
gotta,
mean.
they
If
gotta,
they
I
spend-
think they have to obligate it by sometime in 22, maybe 23. So there
We'll
is an
certainly
end
have a
date.
picture of the value. Once you can look at actual versus budget spend, you can say, well, you didn't have that much money and you spent an extra $100,000. That I would say that must have been from these grants, right? So, I mean, that would be a fair assumption.
What I don't know, and is whether anybody except for the school department knows how much money they were told might be available. I don't know of anybody on the government side that knows that. No one has been told outside of the school department, as far as I know, and I could be mistaken by, but as far as I know, no one outside the school department has been told how much money that is.
I think, John, I'm gonna take a guess. They mentioned the number in our joint meeting, I think. And my recollection is they had a number of something like $900,000.
That's the only figure I recall hearing, and I think it was from that joint meeting.
Was what, 900?
That's the figure that's the
Yeah.
only figure that I recall in terms of any of this context.
And I think at this most recent meeting, the figure was of the second of two grants, ESSER 2 or 3 or whatever the hell it is. The number was like 600 and some thousand of the 900. I mean, they didn't mention of the 900, but it was the number that he was talking about was 600 and something.
So does their budget that they presented or voted on include the 800 that they were shy or not?
No,
So they
minute.
reduced their budget by 800,000?
sorry, the budget that they're voting on,
Right.
did they vote on their
Yeah.
budget yet? Did they vote
Yes.
on their budget?
According to them, they had to.
But then
The budget,
didn't they,
the budget they voted on a couple of nights ago ended up with a deficit, according to their calculation, of 727,000, which is identical with what they presented to us a month, 6 weeks ago. That number of 727 doesn't calculate with what shows on the detail. Asked Adam the question, he said, well, there's some more money that I haven't allocated yet. And it's in a locked spreadsheet, so you can't see, or password locked spreadsheet, so you can't find out what it is. So they're, in their mind, they're $727,000 short, using 105,000 of override money or additional spending due to the override. They then talked about some possible reductions that they had come up with, which totaled, I don't know, $197,000. Do you remember what the number was, John? I think I sent it to you in an email, didn't I? I don't know. Whatever it was, it brought down. Now they haven't made these cuts. Of course, they hadn't approved the budget, so they couldn't very well make a cut to the budget to begin with. But they did not take it into account. But if they were to do that, it would take the 727 down to 450.
Oh.
Then they
So
went
you're
ahead
not
and approved the budget, showing the 720. It adds up to the 727 deficit.
Okay, so you're not talking, does that include the COVID offset? Because I'm looking at that spreadsheet.
Yep.
Okay, so the COVID offset would reduce that by 162,000, but then what's the other offset that would knock it down to the 450?
The COVID money is part of, where it says 727.
Yeah,
Okay, that includes using that COVID money.
okay, so the 727 includes using the COVID offset.
Yeah. Okay. The other cuts that they made, I don't know, three staff positions that were
Right.
going to occur through attrition or retirement or resignation, not layoffs.
Right, and they weren't gonna add that school, that additional class, I guess.
No, that has nothing to do with it.
Okay,
You mean your sixth grade class?
yeah, they weren't gonna add that,
No, that's not an issue.
but that's not part of, okay, because what you're really saying is somehow they've come up with another $292,000 of
Yeah,
cuts.
that could be 290 rather than 190. Yeah.
Okay, because that's what I made a note. So 292 for fiscal 2022. So maybe that was the additional number of cuts, but I don't see in my notes any detail that would determine what that 292 was.
I'm not near where my scratch papers are, and I may have thrown them out to begin with.
Okay.
I just sort of took some notes when I was watching the thing. They did detail where it came from.
Okay. Maybe that's the additional boost in Chapter 70 revenue.
No, Chapter 70 revenue would increase the net school spending requirement, so there'd be no effect.
Okay.
So John, do we have to vote on some budget that they haven't even voted on themselves?
No, they voted on it, and it's 727 in the hole.
Okay,
No, we don't vote on what they voted on. We vote on what we think should be allocated to the schools.
okay.
And I think our choices are a net school spending figure plus 105,000, or net school spending plus 210,000, what we did this year, or net school spending plus the whole 300,000 override.
And just offhand, while last year the figures that we were looking at were 205,000.
It was basically 1/2.
Yeah, but when it got around to what actually occurred with the changes when the budget came out, they really ended up with 304,000 and some odd dollars above net school spending. So they did not have to suffer a reduction of additional money.
I missed that. How did that happen?
Well, because we made some assumptions of what revenue was and what state aid was going to be. And when we got all done, there were different numbers. So as a result, then the net school spending got recalculated. As did, I say, get recalculated, or net
Must have
school
gone
spending
down.
did. Pardon?
Must have gone down if our
Yeah, 'cause we didn't know.
200 went to
No, because
300.
it could have gone up. Well, it depends
Or
which way
200
net
went
school
to
spending
300.
was. So net school spending would have gone, net school spending requirement would have gone down, because the additional money went up.
Right.
So what we allocated is what they got. They got, for this year, they get what was allocated.
But it turned out to be 304,000 more than
Yeah.
we were required to give them, but it was what we felt was correct at the time.
The figure last year, in other words, the figure last year was determined by net school spending plus $205,000 at what information we had available at the time for net school
Yeah.
spending. So that what was allocated, that's the end of it. That's the budget. That's what they get, as long as it turns out to be more than what net school spending was actually calculated as. If later on net school spending goes up or goes down. It's happened both ways in the past. There have been some years where net school spending has gone up a little bit. And then the question is, well, then do you have to go and allocate more money to the schools? And the answer is no. As long as what you allocated is more than what net school spending actually was, you're okay. You've met all the requirements. Same thing if net school spending goes down, is the school required to give you some of what you allocated back? No, they're not. Because what you allocated is what you allocated. That's how much money you said the schools were going to get. And that's how much they got. At that point, it doesn't make any difference what net school spending figure was calculated as. So that's the ins and outs. That's happened 3, 4, 5 times in times I've been on the finance committee. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens every once in a while.
So it's 100, 200, or 300? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, we can talk about whatever we want. I mean, those were just 3 kind of logical pieces. I think the idea was to take the 305,000 override and slowly reduce it over a 3-year period.
Well, that idea came from,
Well, it was in Chris's budget 2 years ago, and we had a discussion with him then. We haven't formally expressed our opinion on that, except for that last year we agreed to the budget that was a 1/3 reduction in the override.
okay,
But we didn't really have any kind of a discussion about it in particular because everything was up in the air as to what was going to be revenue.
Yeah, there were much bigger issues last year for everybody.
yeah, it seemed like last year was Armageddon and
Yeah.
doesn't seem like that happened.
No, apparently what so many legislatures said turned out not to be the case. The state had much more money available than anybody thought was going to happen. And so they were able to keep up some of the aid to the cities that they didn't say they were going to be able to do.
So if we did 200 versus 100, where would that come from? The stabilization deposit? Reducing the deposit by that, or?
Well, if we're going to suggest, given that now in theory, the town moderator was required to submit as a first draft a balanced budget. So that in theory, the income and the expenditures match. So in theory, there is no more $100,000 available. Whether that's completely true, we don't know what kind of leeway there is in the income figures. We don't know whether there might be more government income from what is in the version that's in here. So what we would be able to do would be to, if we want to offer more, we would be able to offer more, provided that it came from stabilization funds. But that's if we really believed that they needed more money for the budget. And I don't know if we believe that for 2 reasons. One is that there is an unknown pot of money, which has been kept secret. And the second is we haven't seen what kind of cuts they would make to their budget if they didn't get the full $725,000. So based on what we have right now, I'm as comfortable with the net school spending plus 105 as I am with anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we asked at our joint meeting for them to provide us with, what would have to be done to balance it. We never got anything back.
Yeah, we've been given nothing. This is kind of like, I don't know if this is the case, but it looks like the attitude of, we want 725,000, give it to us. Don't
They'll
ask
take
questions.
they'll take 450.
Yeah.
No,
It's
the way they were talking, they had no problem whatsoever getting rid of the 290 odd. It was almost like it was a fait accompli, but we won't do it right now because we're not at that stage.
Okay, again, don't ask any questions, right?
Okay, my question is, let's say they settle for, let's say they're down to the bone and they're saying, we gotta have the 450, we gotta have the 450. What do we do? Let's say we have to find a way to come up with it. What do we do?
No, Joe, that's not what we're doing, because we vote
Okay.
tonight on what the budget is. If at
Okay.
town meeting, they want more than the budget, then something has got to be done about where's the money going to come from. At that point, it's probably going to have to come out of stabilization fund. That's 2/3 vote. But as of right now, we don't have to, they have not talked to us. They refused to talk to us. So right now,
Okay, but what about, yeah, just my last question is, based on the letter from the state about, because they didn't do the accounting right or something, about them not spending enough last year, and so I guess the state is saying that they have to spend an additional $41,361 this year in that letter, or does that go away because they solved the problem?
I think they solved the problem for as far as what they reported to the state. They haven't solved the problem as far as we're concerned, because on all the public information that we have, they reported no money being spent on outside school districts.
Right, because the letter
Excuse me,
says,
on public schools.
On public, yeah, on non-public, right.
okay, because the letter says Granby's FY21 requirement, including the $399,536 carryover for last year, is $10,215,299. So then that has to go up by what percent this year?
No. Which year are you talking about, Joe?
Okay.
41,000, the 41,000 is, if the letter were true, the 41,000 is in fiscal 21, has no bearing on fiscal 22.
Okay.
And just as an example, they budget $600,000 of tuition for sped kids, and it doesn't show at all. And on the report.
Okay. So John, we are saying that, so then our budget that we're looking to approve is $10,754,994, which is the Chapter 70 revenue, the required local contribution, the additional town allocation of 105, and the transportation article.
No,
No?
that's the offset money.
Okay, because I'm
The
looking at
the number is what's on Chris's spreadsheet. Forgetting the capital expenditure thing.
Okay. Let me pull that up. Okay, so we're approving minimum net school budget, $7,369,015. Additional school budget, $305,797. School transportation, $807,717. Pathfinder Regional, $358,634. So,
I don't know where you're getting those numbers from.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Let me
sorry.
tell you, let me tell you what,
Okay,
let me tell you what we're approving. We're approving, from town expenditures, we've already approved $2,566,946. We've approved that. That's contained in the general government budgets for the schools. It's the
Okay.
offset. All right, we're approving that. What we have yet to approve is $7,349,210 for the school budget, and that's paid for from combination of Chapter 70 money and money that comes from either taxes or other revenue that we have, plus an additional $105,797. That goes for the school budgets.
No. I gotta correct you. The
all right,
seven,
what do you have, Bob?
the 7,349,210 is the total that we're required to give them,
That's required, right? We're required to give them that.
without the 105. No, with the 105, that's what it adds up to. The number that would be printed in the book would be 7,349,210.
Includes the 105. That
It includes the 105,
that
yeah.
includes the 105. Now, we don't publish the sources. We just publish the budget amounts. Now, how that gets split between the $7,349,210, how that gets split between expenses and compensation, we don't know because we don't have any figures from them that tell us. But Chris will put something together, have to put something together for what it is. But on this one, on the schools in particular, we in fact do not have to approve compensation and expenditures separately because the schools don't have to pay any attention to any separate approval of those items. They can use that as a lump sum, however it is they feel. We break it down for a vote in the town meeting, but the town meeting vote is meaningless as to the split. It carries no weight in law. Only the total amount carries weight in law. The total amount is the 7,349,210. And what that will do together with the town expenditures is net school spending plus $105,797.
So that's all we're voting to approve, correct, John?
Right, that's what we're voting to approve.
Then
And
we should vote.
Unless I make a motion to do a different amount.
I'm sorry.
Unless I make a motion for a different amount.
Yes. Yes, we can, we don't have to, we can go through different motions if we want.
Okay, what do you want to do, Bob? What's your alternative?
I really think we ought to be 305,000, not 105,000. I think we've been wrong in making an assumption that we should scale down the override money, because I think the people voted to give it to the schools and they intended it to stay with the schools. But I'm
Well,
only
that
one
is how
vote.
it was presented for the schools.
Pardon?
So that is how it was presented for the
No, it
schools.
was not. No, it was not.
Oh,
No, it was not.
No?
No, I remembered it very, 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 very carefully. It was presented at the override vote goes for the things that was intended for 1 year only. You're required by law for 1 year only.
But then we gave it to them for how many more years?
We did.
10, 11 or so. But you got to think about some other things. We had an override vote for the library years and years ago. That's not included in what that's not over and above what you'd otherwise give them. We had an override vote for basically most all of the budget of the Council on Aging. There's no talk about the override vote in addition to what the town wants to give. You're in a special circumstance because the schools have this theoretically determined by the outside forces, namely the state, of what net school spending is. But it was made abundantly clear, and in successive years, it was mentioned again, but it was made abundantly clear that an override vote has a force of law for 1 year only. And I think you can argue that the schools were in really special circumstances then, but have they done anything at all to change the theory of education? No. We hear year after year, we want a level service budget. And again, there's no place else in any economy where you can find level service budgets unless you have control of the money supply and can inflate money. Otherwise, you can't do that.
One thing's for sure, it isn't within our public buildings budget, our ambulance, fire department budget, our police budget, or the highway budget. They don't understand the concept of a 2% growth a year either.
Right.
Their idea of 2% is more like 10.
If we thought that the people wanted to actually give that to school, then what we should do is have an underride vote of $305,000 and see if it's voted as an underride vote or see if it's voted to stay. Then you can talk about whether it should be used for the schools or whether it should be used for the general government purposes. But I don't know, when I voted for the 305,000 plus more than that, I voted that under the circumstances that I knew the legal requirement was for 1 year. It has to go to the specific purpose for which you voted. And then after that, it's part of the general tax collection of the town. So you're
Then why
raising.
didn't you say something in the other 9 years?
Well, why didn't I say something? What am I going to say?
Well,
I think
I guess I don't understand why 10 years in a row you can do something by not doing something, and then all of a sudden in the 10th year, it's like, we shouldn't have done it.
But it's because
Well-
we're trying to squeeze the school into accomplishing some things that they don't want to even talk about and think about. So if you squeeze them hard enough, maybe you can force them to think outside the box.
I mean, we've let things go in the schools that there's been no realistic, as far as I'm concerned, no realistic look at what schooling means in Granby. No realistic look at how you can go about even thinking about budgets for schools in Granby. And we know, for example, or we're pretty sure, for example, that they are not going to need the extra money this year because they've got money tucked away in the state that we don't even know about.
We suspect.
Haven't talked about anything in terms of cuts except for the bit that Bob talked about. They've ignored the fact that we're an additional $500,000 above what they claim we're above for net school spending, what we're spending from the town. We had an additional $500,000 to spend in there. It's a money pit.
Yeah, but until I mean, I tend to agree with John in terms of, the budget plus the 105. That's the only way you're going to hold their feet to the fire to come back with some sort of plan in the future on, we have to go through a zero-based budgeting process every 5 years in my work, where basically it makes you reinvent everything you do as if you aren't doing it today.
Right.
And unless any department, and I hold this to the entire town, not just the schools, but when you look at 99% increases in police and 300% increases in building department and all this craziness that I saw in Bob's spreadsheet, somebody, and I don't know who that is in the town, has to go and say, look, we're going to go do a zero-based budgeting project. We're starting it today. As soon as this budget's approved, basically you have to reinvent what you're doing and look at taking cost out. And that's what we're forced to do in the private sector. Somebody, and I don't know who does that, but town administrator or who in this town would be the one that would have to say that's what we need to do.
So we gotta take the 200,000 and give it to the fire department and the police department?
Just wait a minute. There are three separate things which really should be considered: school budget, town budget, taxpayer taxes. We're only talking about the school budget right now, but we've sort of hinted at the need to think about the town budget, because some of the departments have just been growing completely out of bounds with any realistic estimation based upon an inflation or what services we've added. And but the forgotten party in all this, because he's not on a committee, is the taxpayer in Granby. The taxpayer in Granby right now, I mean, what was a couple of years ago, we were what, $20 per thousand. We were the 10th highest tax rate. Now our property values are still in the bottom quarter, but still for individual taxpayers, that doesn't make any difference. You look at the dollars out. We are high taxed for the community that we're in. And so when I heard about the idea coming from one of the select board members that maybe what we should be doing is asking the town if they want a $305,000 underride on a vote. I mean, how much more taxes can be stood by a town that earlier in this year had a 20% unemployment rate? That's what Granby's unemployment was.
The taxes are gonna go up 2.5% no matter what.
Yeah, 2.5%.
Regardless of what we do with the school department, taxes are going up by 2.5%. Or the total taxes collected are going up by 2.5%.
Correct.
And that's faster than the increase that the school department gets. If we have an underride for 305,000, I guess $200,000 of it is going to have to come out of the pocket of the fire department or the police department, because there's only 105,000 sitting with the school department.
The argument that the tax rate is going up faster than the school rate is, I don't like that argument, because that would mean that, for example, any department, let's take the highway department. The highway department, if they decided to cut back what they were doing by 20% and raise everybody's salaries, that would seem to fit in with the raw figures. And yet that's not what we want. How's that different from the schools?
Well,
on a per pupil basis,
the main reason that those departments' expenses have gone up, not the police, but the fire department, the public buildings, and the highways, because they've added personnel. They're providing more services. They don't have a level budget. They're increasing their size.
Right. And you
They're
may remember
providing more services. We're going to have more roads paved. The roads are better than most towns around, but we got $200,000 every year now for the highway department, over and above the Chapter 90 money, twice what they used to get.
in a number of years in the past, we have specifically remarked in our opening report to the town that town is going to have to decide what services it wants and how much it's willing to pay. And the town has never done that. The town has never done that. The town looks like it's going to prefer to go out of money first before it decides on what services it wants. As long as the money looks like it's there, well, let's spend some more of it. And I don't think that that's been realistically looked at. I'm not aware of anybody that's put together a program, a committee to take a serious look at all the different departments, the services that they say they're providing and what we're paying for them, and asking the question of, do we really want this? Hasn't happened.
I mean, you know, John, when we were talking with Chris, just as an example, it's costing us $40,000 a year more to make sure that our buildings are clean.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is maybe a little bit hard to justify. I don't know how bad they were before, but $40,000 to have buildings look cleaner.
But it's a COVID protocol, guys. I mean, that's, remember,
No. This is it. It didn't work out the way we were doing it before. So let's go to a way where we can pin somebody if they don't do a good job and we're paying the piper for it.
Yeah, but we're not paying health benefits, are we? Because it's an outside service.
That's correct.
So that saves us there, you know. I mean, I guess, you know, if I go back to the highway, yes, we're looking at the numbers, and John, you're absolutely right. I mean, I certainly hate my tax bill. You know, I looked at when I first moved in here and now today. But on the other hand, you know, like you said, certain services, I mean, the roads in Granby have been getting in a lot better shape. And so I think that's a worthwhile investment, you know, so I certainly stand by that.
It's only the last 2 years that we've been doing it, Joe, so.
Yeah,
you're-
okay. Well, we'll see. Well, hey, look, the roads I drive on are in certainly much better shape, so I certainly
You
feel
live over
better
on
about
Taylor
that.
Street? You live on Taylor Street?
I'm still on Taylor.
Well, you got paid recently.
Yeah, but a lot of
Oh, no
other
wonder
roads got-
No wonder 2 members of our committee are happy with the highway department. They have a smooth road to ride on.
That's right. No, but just in general, I'm just saying,
Falling apart now.
There's a
yeah,
lot
but
of,
I'm just saying in general, you know, we're attacking the road problem, and I think that's important because the way I look at government, yes, the school budget is always the biggest challenge. The police department to me is always the second biggest challenge. You know, because of the power each of those unions have. And the other thing is that it's just important. The most important thing that I think in government is that people want the basics, the basic infrastructure. They want the trash, they want the roads, you know, but they can't really afford too high a taxes. School is always the wild card, you know, because we have no tax base outside of the residents. So in the long run, I'm always for closing our high school, God forbid, but yes, closing our high school and trying to yoke with 1 or 2 other towns, you know. In the long run, that's how we save money.
Not necessarily, Joe.
Well, I'd rather pay on a per pupil basis and not have to pay for the infrastructure of the building. Let's face it,
Oh, yeah,
what's one of our debates? HVAC, even though it's budgeted at 4.493 million, could double according to John because of the requirements of the state in a building that we should, you know.
I no.
Really too old.
My point wasn't whether the building was, how bad the building was. It was that obviously we would save the cost. If we weren't using it, we'd save the cost of insuring it, heating it, repairing it, maintaining it. But on the other hand, you're gonna have to pay a fee to the people where you're going to, and they've got the same kind of expenses over there. So maybe you're gonna pay more per pupil for instructional costs in a regional district than you are in your own district. You may be able to end up saving on the physical costs.
Yeah, well, but then again, in the long term, you're not going to be paying our generous health retirement benefits in the long term.
Well,
You know, because
they
it'll go
passed
to
them-
somebody, it'll go to the South Hadley system or some other system or Belchertown or whoever. So you're going to treat that differently. But, you know, we're not here to decide on that. So I'm in agreement with John at this point, but I would not be opposed to giving the school budget at least another couple $100,000 if need be, personally. But I do agree that this is where we should stand, see what the real money is, and then figure out what we should do.
I will say one thing that came up that Chris said when John and I were talking to him. He said it's at 105,000, but he does have some wiggle room.
Whatever that means. Okay.
Yeah, I
Well, he
stand
could
on what I
justify in
said
his
with
mind. I guess
105.
what it means is he could justify in his mind giving them more than 105,000.
Mm-hmm.
I say justify, find the funds to do it. It would not have
Let
to
the
be come out of the stabilization fund if you were doing it voluntarily.
Then let
If
the
you're not doing
townspeople
it
decide,
voluntarily.
right?
Pardon?
In the end, why don't we just let the town decide? I mean, we should fund it the way we see fit. And I agree with John's recommendation from the beginning. And if the town wants to give them more money, then the townspeople will decide that.
I agree in principle, but as a practical matter, if they want another $700,000, there we know absolutely the only way to do that is to get money from the stabilization fund.
Yeah, at
And-
that level it is.
Yeah, and
Right.
and more than that, the reason I've always been very, very leery about taking money from the stabilization fund is that when it's asked for year after year after year, then it's not special circumstances. They're just making no effort at all to keep their budget into something that the town can do. So that what is presented as the budget, if it's presented with $100,000 over minimum net, it's going to be very, very hard to get another $700,000 from stabilization fund. Not impossible because it's done before, but it's going to be hard to do that. But that's what they'll ask for. They're not going to ask for another $100,000.
No.
They won't do that. So that what
Why not make them jump through the hoop?
I'm sorry,
Why not make them jump through the hoop then?
for the whole amount?
Well, I mean, because the town is ultimately the ones who are going to have to decide to fund that or not. Yes.
Right, but at the level of whatever is presented in the budget, whether it's 100,000 or 200,000 more, that is still, I think, the most likely thing that's going to happen for their budget. It's more likely than them getting either an override vote or for money coming from the stabilization fund. So that it could be important as to whether we say it should be 100 over minimum or 200 over minimum, because that's most likely what their budget is going to wind up being. I don't think they're not going to get $700,000 or $600,000 from stabilization funds. Particularly if they need that, they ignore the fact that what they really ought to be doing is asking for another override. If they want to do this year after year after year, that says you need an override.
But it doesn't matter because we won't give it to them more than 1 year.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
10 years, right? Every 10 years, we'll ask them to do
No,
another
every
override.
1 year, because we only have to commit to the 1 year for that budget.
I know, but from our conversation earlier.
No, okay, so,
Well, we haven't had a town-wide dialogue on the school budget since the last override for the $305,000. You know, and I, despite the fact that we very loudly and forcefully proclaimed that legally it was 1 year, it was clear that people thought it was going to be more than that. I mean, I don't have any doubts myself on that people thought it was going to be more than that. I don't know if people thought it was going to be forever. The chance to find out is not by just setting the budget that amount. The chance to find out is to ask. It's pretty easy to ask people. You can do that with a vote.
You know, advocating a little bit more for them. If you gave them 300, that's 200 more than where they are now. So that would leave them at $250,000 shy. Anybody have any feeling as to whether they can work with that?
I don't
first,
know.
In other words, that might get them close enough so they go away.
No, Bob, I thought that would leave them 90,000 shy. If they can live with a $450,000, if they can, right, did I understand it correctly that they could actually live with a 450,000 increase? Is that how you came up with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, they
Okay, you're
seem
right then. Okay, you're
rather
right.
confident that they can get rid of the 299 and survive. So that if we gave them $200,000 more, they're a quarter of a million on the short side from what I think they're willing to live with.
but as far as we've been told, which is nothing, They can do that with no additional town money. They may have that money sitting at the state coffers, waiting for them to send in a bill. We do not know.
And then we're just kicking the can down the road 2 years. Which is what we've done for about the last 5.
Well, if we gave, okay, I'm just gonna play devil's advocate politically. If we gave them 200,000 more dollars, what would be the likely amount that they might try to push more for than that additional 200,000? Because we can then be saying, okay, hey, we're compromising, but we're not gonna go beyond this. We're not gonna deplete stabilization because stabilization is meant for something else than ongoing operations. So we can argue that. We can make that compromise and say, hey, you know, look, you're getting COVID money. You know, we don't know what that number is, but that COVID money should help you in the way that you can use it, make up whatever difference beyond this. So we've tried to meet you more than the 105 for this budget year by adding Bob's 200,000. If they're still now 250,000 short, well, the COVID money or the special other money or whatever else is going to at least make up for that and maybe more.
Joe, we don't make political decisions. We only
Okay.
make financial decisions. We only make financial recommendations. We stay out of the politics entirely. If somebody wants to talk politics, they're welcome to it, but that's not our role. And as to whether or not we agree to a certain amount of money above anything else we propose, seems to me to depend upon conversations that we have with the school committee about what their intentions are for the future. We haven't had those conversations. They won't have them with us. Nobody wants to talk about the financial realities of running a school. So we're stuck a little bit, but we cannot make political decisions. We have to restrict ourselves to what we think are the financials and let somebody else then take and either cast that aside or pay attention to it.
Okay.
So one of the things that I just, you know, I see in this process is the whole issue is around transparency.
Yes.
You know, because everybody is postulating and guessing about things that, you know, may or may not be, and because people won't show their cards, it's like a big game of poker with the schools, right? And that's no way to run a budgeting process when everybody is suspect of the other person's, you know, intentions and finances. So, you know, therein lies, you know, probably the biggest issue of everything that's taking time in the conversation, right? Well, they might have this COVID money. We don't know exactly how much. They're just going to be able to get it. Well, we got to give them more money so that if we give them this more money, then they won't ask for as much money, and we won't have those. There has to be a way to get transparency so that we don't have to go through this, and we can get to your conversation, John, which I think is a very important conversation about funding of the schools on a long-term basis and what that means and what it needs to look like, right?
Yeah.
But until we get to that point of transparency, we'll never get to your very important question, right?
That's right.
So I think the posture you're taking, and I understand, you know, well, if you give them this, then they won't ask for that. You know, I understand that, but the only way you're going to get to a point where people have to show their cards is by calling somebody's bluff, right? And so if you hold their feet to the fire with 105,000 and that's it, essentially you're calling the bluff, right?
Yep.
So until somebody demands the transparency and open the books, and we need to see everything, and that either has to come from the select board or the town administrator or somebody, but until somebody does that, we will go through this same gyration forever and never get to answer the real question of what does schooling look like in the town of Granby 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? And how are we going to fund that? And what are the mechanisms for doing that?
The transparency question is kind of interesting on another level because we're saying Chris hasn't been told what that amount of money is that's sitting at the state level. It's wrong to think of Chris as the town administrator. Think of Chris as the accountant for the town. The town accountant does not know. Now, how bad is that? The town accountant does not know.
So that's why I go back to your original proposal of the plus 105 and call their bluff and make, because if they have to go for an override or go to the stabilization fund or something, you know, we now have an avenue to say, okay, well, show us what opportunities you have for grant money from the state relative to COVID. Okay, show us, we can ask to see all the cards and demand they show them to us in order to approve something out of the stabilization fund or to go for an override, because people are going to want to know. So I think you have to call the bluff.
How many years did they come to us and ask us for more money, aside from the 305?
Quite a few.
I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars, seeming like year after year.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they're not going to ask? Seems
They're gonna
weird.
ask. It's just gonna be, I think it's gonna be hard to get $600,000. May not be. But I think it's gonna be hard.
But they're going to get it out of stabilization, which is harder than getting it now.
Right.
I guess I don't understand their strategy or whatever that is.
I put down some numbers. Fiscal year 16 through 19, 4 years in a row, they had on average about $650,000 above net school spending.
I remember Isabelina coming year after year after year.
Yeah. And a couple of those were monies where they got the 2/3 vote to take it out of the stabilization fund also.
Yeah.
So we got to pick something to vote on. I know personally I have another meeting with the Far East here coming up in 32 minutes
Okay.
because it'll be 9 o'clock in the morning there. So
Yeah, I think we've
we
discussed
got to.
it.
What's that?
I think we've discussed it. I think you're correct. We ought to be able to take a vote. Or 2 votes or 3 or whatever.
Okay, so Bob, are you going to amend the number that John talked about?
No, I don't want to end up on the short end of a vote.
Okay. Okay, then John, would you?
And I don't want 2 other people to end up on the short end of a vote in the event that it passed either.
All right, well,
Otherwise, I'm not going to rock it.
It's okay, you can be the loyal opposition, I guess, so.
and I'll take a vote to approve the budget, the school budget presented to us in draft form by the town administrator's draft budget.
So moved.
Move
Do I
to
have
second.
A second, that's a second. Any further discussion or questions?
No.
If not, then all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
And before you get on to another subject, John, I wrote up a Word document to be used to tell the school department of what our decision was. Is it something you guys want to take a look at and see whether you want to send it out to them right now and start getting them going?
I will always vote to accept any draft work that anybody else has written to take a look at. So yes.
Well, I'm not going to. It's not flattering to them, and I did it with blanks in there for what the budget was and what it was. But I think I laid out most of the. I don't think I put in COVID though. I can't remember. But I've got the dates in it as to when they asked for things and when they haven't responded and the like.
Okay, but we don't have to vote on it, so, right? You can forward it to John or a copy to everybody. Everybody can give some quick
I can get downstairs and get it off my computer down there and send it to you right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I'd rather have
Rich
some
has
time to read it. Honestly, Bob, I'd like to have the time to read it and be thoughtful about it.
Okay,
Yeah, and if anybody has any ideas for things to include in our annual report, just jot them down in an email and topics even doesn't have to be many words, but if you have notes, ideas on topics, let me know and I'll try to put something together. We'll have to approve that next week. Now Kathy has scheduled a meeting for us again on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I don't expect that we'll need all of those days, but we will need maybe 2 of them. Certainly one, because we have to approve the write-up next week.
Okay.
I'll give you one subject right now, John.
Yeah.
Bylaw changes that involve the finance committee.
I mean, to write about what changes were made?
Yeah, that we're in favor of them and we're involved in it.
Okay, that could be good. Since we are in agreement with just everything except basically including that table. Very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, anybody got anything else? Just go ahead and jot it down as a topic and I'll think about putting some words on it. So I don't think we have anything else for tonight. Anybody have any other topics, what we need to discuss? I think that's it. So take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you all very much for coming tonight. I think we had a productive meeting here and